shadow work, true shadow work, it's painful.
Yes.
It's nasty. It's dirty.
But it gives you a chance to really to start to think for yourself. If you don't accept the fact that working from the collective is a better way to go, I have no way to convince you.
Welcome back to part 2 of the Roots of Discord. Let's not wait any longer and jump right back in.
Don't adjust your settings. You are right where you need to be. Pull the curtains. Lock the doors. They can't know. They don't want you knowing. So pull up a chair and prepare. The Conclave is now in session.
Okay, so we talk about the shadow, and when we look at it in the metaphysical standpoint, that's the negative sides to the self and the trauma that's happened to you and the things in the past that
the bits and pieces you try to keep buried.
You try to keep it buried while acknowledging it, learning from it, and growing from it. And I think part of, and this is kind of maybe a side tangent, maybe it does fit in with the same shadow that you talk about in the book. I find so many people there, and you hinted at this earlier. Shadow work, true shadow work, it's painful. It's nasty. It's dirty. You don't come out of it feeling great. And we have so many people like, hi, I just did all my shadow work and I'm healed. And it's like, oh, sweet baby child.
I see
bless your heart.
People doing like daily shadow work prompts. And I'm like, you're not doing like, you need to give yourself some time to sit with some of these.
Yeah, because the shadow ultimately goes to the other.
Yeah.
And remember I mentioned also ego antibody systems? The primary guardian of the primary energy for the ego antibody system is the shadow. Okay, because that and that is the energy that keeps us where we are. It's the scary thing. Okay, it actually creates a fear scenario that helps to keep us trapped. When the great masters have talked about fear is ultimately comes from contacting that shadow, which is also very similar to what is called the gate guardian in esoteric traditions. Okay, that's the thing you got to get past if you want true liberation, is the shadow. And the shadow, the other, they're going to be the big, scary thing that keeps you in self. You know, the thing that mommy made, you're going to stay in that with all your prejudices and predispositions, and you're going to be that thing, and it was the shadow that does it. When you finally peel back all the layers of the shadow and realize that the whole freaking thing was your construction, and you realize, holy shit, my whole identity just unraveled. Like I said, that is a dangerous moment. That's what monasteries were made for, is for somebody to get to that moment when they're, okay, it's time to go. And you don't have any place to go, and suicide and jumping off cliffs and stuff like that seems to make sense. That's whenever the monk gets a hold of it and he says, walk with me a while.
Let's talk.
Yeah, let's go look at the beautiful sky. Yeah, that's when you need that sort of influence in your life.
Okay. So then that's kind of the thought process that I'd gotten from the direction. Whereas, this shadow is what we need to get over and get away from and whatnot. Whereas when we look at the shadow of shadow work, it's the embracing of the other side of yourself. So I could see the two things. Like, once you embrace the negative of your life and learn from and grow from it, it seems like that is then where you get to meet your shadow and push it aside and really
start dismantling.
Yeah.
And what happens is you have to love it. That's the only way past it. When you have right and you have left, okay, they only make sense till they get here. Okay, you can't and this is the moment where you are really with the shadow, when the pressure is absolutely even and there's nowhere to go. Literally nowhere to go, nothing to be. In fact, I often use this when I'm doing lectures, is I say, look, normally normal life is like this. We have, plus, minus, left, right, that are constantly fluctuating between each other. But when you throw these two things together at each other with equal force, suddenly up happens. And up is not thought of in this equation. I'm only back and forth, but all of a sudden, up. And that is, I think, the way to most clearly describe the Enlightenment moment.
I mean, that makes sense because when you think of enlightenment, you do have that like out of body experience, and like if you're like picturing your head, you're picturing somebody that's elevating upwards. So yeah, that makes. I never even really thought of it. Interesting.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of people that have done some work and have some good opinions about this stuff, but um, to get this information, it has a high cost. It has a very high cost, and that's what I said. I just don't see everybody doing it.
That's fair. People aren't willing to put in that hard work.
And the hard work, like I said, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to damage yourself the way that you see yourself being damaged by this process. It makes no sense at all. This is driven by, how can I put this? When it's like when you're falling already. You didn't want to fall in the first place. But how do I own it? I dive.
Yeah.
When you're falling, dive. And if you dive, then all of a sudden you've got some place to grab onto. You're not just, oh my God, oh my God. You suddenly have purpose and direction, and you can start to make some sense out of this intrinsically chaotic moment that you throw yourself into. But when you dive, then you all of a sudden you say, oh my God, I'm taking possession of that. I'm taking possession of that. Oh my God, I love this guy. He's a horrible person, and um, it's like this, one thing after another. You're flying down this abyss, and stuff this hitting you in the face from all over the different places, and you're trying to figure out how to orient yourself in the whole thing.
See, and I'm chuckling because you pretty much just perfectly defined how I tell people the Tower card.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you look at the artwork of the Tower card, two people are falling, except one isn't falling. He's jumped. He's diving.
Yep.
And I always tell people use that as the point of this big change is coming. Embrace it, roll with it, learn from it. Don't just let it happen to you.
Yep.
So yeah, that's
That's why it's my favorite card.
Yeah, right. So with egotism being the big challenge, what does that look like when we're comparing it to like the self, to others, to the collective? Does that ego, like, does that have the same elements? Does it have the same look? Does it have the same challenges?
It becomes, like I said, a conscious creation as opposed to an unconscious creation. Awareness, you still have to operate, okay, in society. Okay, and people are going to be looking for the usual relationship cues, language, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But like an actor, okay, you can modify your presence to get the best possible result in any particular circumstance. And the difference between this and a sociopath is that an enlightened person comes at it from complete compassion. Okay, sociopaths have 0 compassion. All higher order thought comes from drawing from the collective, and you can't do that if you're an ego. So if you really have breached your ego, your identity, the one you use with the world, is a complete fabrication.
So you're saying approaching from like a position of empathy, you're more able to read the needs of the collective and insert now your own self into what the collective essentially needs without completely losing your own sense of self.
But you lose your sense of self during the entry point.
Yeah.
And then to whatever degree you can recreate it. And where you get your validation, where I used to get validation from being supreme, I now get validation from being harmonious. Okay, and I don't mean harmonious in a airy fairy, lay down and die type way. Christ was operating from that when, he made the decisions that he made to, go and get crucified. Joseph Campbell said one time that Christ went to the cross the way a bridegroom goes to the bride. This is the type of things that compassionate people that can operate from that realm do. So it's not like death doesn't happen. It's not like combat doesn't happen. It's that it becomes a harmonious, unifying force as much as you can possibly do within the limitations of something as horrible as combat, for instance.
So then it seems like the key to breaking free from the oppression of it all is the removal of the egotism.
It is, but it's the single most problematic thing, and we can't just flatten ego because we need it to get here.
I was just going to say, so, it becomes that necessary evil.
Mm-hmm.
And now is that something even the enlightened person will have to retain a little bit of, because you do still have that bit of self?
There's a whole most people who deal with holistic medicine understand the relationship between the, for instance, consciousness and the body, and how a consciousness that's not efficient can throw the body into turmoil.
Mm-hmm.
When you take possession and ownership of your higher order stuff, you still have to. Your body is really a symbiosis. There are consciousnesses all through your body, chakras, cells. All of them have consciousnesses that are in some way separate from your consciousness. And in order to continue the agreement, you have to still continue to give your body what it needs in order if you want to continue to participate. So you have to now take responsibility for, for giving your body what it needs. So yes, something needs to maintain, but again, it's still under your control. If you take that away, then you told that story about the monk and, conscious dying. You're in that position. And I'm not ecstatic about those. And there's a concept that's especially known to Tibetan Buddhism called the inward Buddha. And when they pronounce the words for this, they spit. Because if you have the knowledge of this higher place and you don't use it for everybody's benefit, that makes you an inward Buddha. So if you're deciding to exit this plane, if you're not doing it for compassionate purposes, like the Dalai Lama, for instance, makes a conscious effort to reincarnate so that he can bring his wisdom and leadership to the world over and over again. That's the line on what's going on with the reincarnation with the Dalai Lama. So that would be a reason to disincarnate so that you can reincarnate and help this out. Doing that kind of a very complete exit from the world is in many spiritual philosophies a fail.
Because if you're not using that
for the
for
construction
the collective, then
the collective, I call it God's project. Creation's God's project. You want to participate in it, you don't want to participate in it. And God, if you read Genesis, there's a certain way you can read it where you see that what really is happening in Genesis is God is differentiating internally when he separates the heavens from the earth. Okay, and eventually that differentiation transmits into the individual human bodies, Adam and Eve, and then they eventually believe that they are separate. And you can look at that as kind of the highest, the reason for the whole thing was, and that is original sin, in my estimation. That's the best explanation of original sin, is the idea that we have actually self-convinced ourselves that we're separate from the rest of the universe.
I think it also gives a good argument for animism practices that believe like everything has a little bit of the divine, a little bit of a soul.
Yes, it's much more complete.
Yeah, it's like, okay, yeah, because we all have a little bit of the divine is a part of us.
But when you follow animism, then that also works against egoism.
Yeah.
when you follow it all the way through, which again is the trade-off. It's always the trade-off. Great spirituality is a trade-off with egoism, but egoism is not anything to be disregarded or thrown away lightly. Our kids need it in order to have a good incarnation here. They need adults who understand it so that they can take them, let them grow, and then when they get to the point, and this is with like rites of passage, which you alluded to earlier, when they get to the point where they start to challenge social authority, that for boys at least, that was when they marked them for some sort of initiation process where they'd have to face their mortality, death. And that produced a respect for the social order.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because they didn't have that respect. They were challenging authority. Go out, here's a knife, go out and kill a bear. And they came back and said, the rules and the stuff that's going on here really isn't so bad. In fact,
You know what?
You're being an asshole. Go
Like
face it,
having
Grizzly.
yeah.
Okay, Jess, do you want to take the next quote here?
The academia one.
Yeah, I'm terrible at reading now.
So, in your book, you said, predictably, because of the forces against identity have been so supercharged, even academia, which has long been a fiction and moderating entity, is currently validating the feelings of traumatized fiction creators instead of sustaining institutions where personal fiction can be challenged and moderated. So you're saying that, again, it's acting more of an echo chamber for some of these, reinforcing that, like, almost like the loud minority.
Reinforcing out of control egoism, yeah. We have decriminalized out of control egoism.
Mm.
Okay, and in fact, giving it not just decriminalized it, but made it socially protected.
Like almost rewarded it.
Yeah, protected it, rewarded it. Yes, you must, in the workplace do X, Y, Z, and you must say X, Y, Z. And so we basically said that everybody has the right to their own opinions or their own perspectives or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with that, but challenging that is where the balance comes from.
Yeah, like you have the right to that opinion or that objective thought. But if I can come at you with a counterbalance to that,
mm-hmm.
you should be able to have that discussion in a way that's not insane, like in a way that is productive, that is actually speaking.
It is, but in nature, okay, where you don't have the moderating force, like the guys in a bar, walking down the street. Nature, if you let it, will put that person in a position where, hey, maybe, your idea about how this is supposed to go really isn't very effective or such a great thing. And like I said, this is going to, there are people who are, like a vegan that says, oh my God, you eating a cow today. And what a terrible person you are. And, that person's going to come at you, but it gives you a chance to really, to start to think for yourself, to start to really say, I've been judging people because they had a hamburger today. And I really now I'm starting to think this through. And maybe I shouldn't be as angry with them about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Buddha died from trichinosis from eating pork. I mean, Christ certainly, was not strictly a bread eater.
Yeah. That was just his last meal, which is like, man, sad. Sorry, dude.
Yeah, and life exists by eating itself. That's the big revelation here. Life exists by eating itself. You don't get out of karmic debt because you ate vegetables today.
Well, and it's not like vegetables are cruelty free. Like, it's not like modern veganism is even really as cruelty free as they like to pretend it is. So it's like,
well, I think it's a karmic get out of jail free card. And,
yeah,
and it's not.
And it's not.
It doesn't frankly get you much of anything. Now, the right way to go about it was the way that, for instance, Native Americans went. They thanked the buffalo.
Yeah,
they revered the buffalo. They made promises to the buffalo.
They used every part they could.
They used every part they could, but they literally, I mean, they had the buffalo dance. Native Americans have buffalo dances that tell stories that ensure the prosperity of their tribe and their ability, for instance, to be able to get through the winter with enough buffalo meat, because they brought the buffalo, the consciousness of the buffalo into their process, and the buffaloes gave them permission to eat some of them. Okay, as a result of it, because the buffalo understood that that was a sacrifice that was
Everything in life eats something
eat
else.
something else, exactly, and that you can't get away from that. And flowers have consciousness.
Yeah.
People have measured it; they have consciousness. So saying that that a cow was higher on the evolutionary scale than a carrot, frankly, just doesn't hold spiritual water.
That an ant or a human, neither are any more.
Right, and especially if you eat that carrot and think you have a right to it. Okay, that's the way not to eat a carrot.
So then, okay, so what would we say? And then I'm fairly certain already in the explanation we've covered it. The difference between the modern academia opposed to historical academia is it's that we saw more in the past the teaching and the passing on of purely facts and less of that opinion and egotism and just being like 1 + 1 = 2. The Mayflower sailed on this date. This, like it was it more.
We've lost intellectual rigor, and we've lost our understanding of the importance of encountering conflict. You remember, like in the Dead Poet Society, I mentioned that once already. You remember the crusty old teacher, okay, that would constantly challenge, had the staff, and he was constantly challenging the students' perspectives and ideas, and in a way that wasn't always so kind. Well, that's what intellectual rigor looks like. The ability to encounter that crusty old wise man and still be able to figure out how to either learn from that encounter, how to learn from that encounter. And so we don't do that anymore. No, we do not challenge people. It's socially unacceptable to challenge people. And we say that schools are safe places where you're allowed to have your prejudices and predispositions. No, 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 no. You don't have anything that resembles the original reason for education if you don't put somebody in an environment where they have to be challenged in their perspectives. That's what education really is. That's when it's really effective, is when you challenge people. I used to, I said I was a debate coach, and the type of debate that I coached was something called value debate, where you had two people square off against each other, and the format was called Lincoln Douglas, and they would debate value propositions like resolved the rights of the individual are more important than the rights of a society. And in order to be effective, they had to literally be able to argue both sides of that every other round. And that is the essence of education. I wish I could tell you how amazing it was. We'd sit around reading legal dictionaries and getting prepped for these things and talking philosophy. And these kids, they're high school kids, and they're in like way, 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 way deep, and you could see them suffering, trying to get their heads around it. And all of a sudden, you threw them into a room where there was a trophy at stake, okay, with another person, and all of a sudden, I would be sitting in the back of these rooms, literally. I mean, just aghast. Holy shit, Henry Kissinger just walked into the room, and it looks just like the kid that I've known for the last, and I'm thinking to myself, literally, it was like biblically, the scales fell from their eyes, and they were as fluent on the plus side of these arguments as they were on the negative side of these arguments. Every single one of those kids, like I said, the doctor who wrote the preface, every single one of those kids has done amazing things with their lives. They've overcome amazing problems. One of the girls has a type of brainstem cancer that can't be cured. Okay, it can only be maintained. So she will have active cancer in her body for the rest of her life. She wrote a book about it. Fabulous, fabulous person. Just choked up a little. Just but that's one of the things that made them those people, is the ability to get into the trenches and do what they did.
And anybody who's listening to this, you don't have to take this approach just when it comes to academia. It's every day. You know, I've had people throughout my life regularly, especially as politics become louder and louder and louder, ask me, well, what news station do you listen to? What sites do you get from?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like ABC, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News,
Or worse yet,
Daily Wire.
or worse yet, the lie. I don't listen to the news.
Yeah, no,
that they think
that's
that they,
garbage.
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I've always told people, get it from both sides. Learn
as many
sides
perspectives as you can will get you
because
somewhere closer to the truth.
you'll see an overlap. It's a small overlap, but you'll see an overlap, and that's where the truth really lies. And it's the same thing when you're looking at doing like the debate, the Lincoln Douglas style debate. You need to know both sides, and that's where you really, because you go into an argument with just a hell-bent realization of this is right and this is what I believe. Then when you start actually opening up and listening to the other side, it's gonna change you and it's gonna mold you together. And that's where you really start seeing the truth. Mm-hmm. So don't wait for when you have to get into a debate or just want to be able to ready to be debate. This is something that's important for all of life. Understand both, even if you take the stance of know what your enemy is thinking. It's still that same process. So whatever it is that helps you get to that point, look at all sides to everything. And that's going to hopefully help with everything in general.
Go out of your way to get those sides.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not really pleasant to go get those sides. I mean, sometimes you have to see the results of what it is that you've done. It's kind of like the Ebenezer Scrooge thing. You know, you have to see the results of your behaviors and your actions.
Got to see that goes to Christmas future before.
Yeah, exactly. That before you really get it about how things go down. And I think that was part of the brilliance of that, that play, that part of Dickens was the ability to like show people the results of their actions, and out in a way that he wouldn't see if he stayed in his his mansion with the drapes closed.
Echo chambers are literally the worst.
They're absolutely the worst.
So this next question is a little bit of a side outside, taking it outside of, and it's one that I was questioning and asking myself, and it wasn't until Jess and I compared notes after we both got done with the book, and she had the same question. I'm like, oh, good, I'm not an idiot. Because it's something that seems like so seemingly simple.
It's just a little weird. Like, I wonder why he did that.
So and this is probably even earlier in the book than where we are timeline wise with the questioning.
When I made the note, I think it was page 12 that I made the note on, but it could have been earlier.
So you spelt God without an O and with a dash instead. Why?
It's actually a tradition that's very well known to conservative Judaism.
Okay.
But for me, let me start the explanation with this. This is one of my favorite stories. A Zen student said to his master, "Master, what is Zen?" And the teacher said, "Zen is a finger pointing at the moon." And when I first heard that, it bowled me over, but I spent a lot of time meditating on that phrase. And I said, oh my God, if you fixate on the finger, the moon moves and the finger has no purpose. Right? And I thought there is so much wisdom in that, and it applies to so many things. Like this turns into dogma and there's nothing up there that's worth getting to. I mean, that's just an example of the implications of this. So when I use the dash for God, I'm using a directional indicator. And I put the dash in there because I want people to understand that it is inefficient to the point of perverse to create an image of God with the old white guy with the beard and the robes. And it is just a directional indicator. God, to whatever degree exists, is a presence, but it's an ineffable, undefinable presence. And the dash in the word God is a tribute to that.
I knew I had to have some sort of,
Yeah,
and that's why I thought it was just like, oh man, this is just a tradition. I just don't. I've glazed over, just don't know of. But okay, that makes perfect sense. And I actually love that this story with
Mhm.
the moon and that's thought provoking.
Mhm.
I love that. Okay, sorry, that Jess, you look
No,
looking
no,
at the
I was
paper
just seeing where
intently.
we're
So I was
going.
like, oh,
No,
is she
that's
gonna
just my
pop out the
my
next?
caffeine is not working face.
Fair enough. So the next thing that really kind of struck me is you talk about the Pied Piper,
Mhm.
right? The people that are kind of leading us down that path of, or at least in the wrong direction of the enlightenment we need.
Mhm.
What are some red flags that people should be looking out for these Pied Piper type individuals?
Their their fundamental manipulation ability comes from they work with our fears. Fears are all illusions. They're things that haven't happened. Okay, and we're running from them anyway. And magnifying fears and creating fears is the major music that comes out of these Pied Pipers, these awful human being, the worst of society. You guys, yeah, you know what I'm
We're
talking about.
talking to you.
I'm talking to you, the ones with the big bank accounts, and that's what you think is going to keep you warm for the rest of your life. God's coming, son, ma'am, whoever sees this, and I'm here to tell you that money is never going to make you warm enough. Okay, so all right, soapbox.
And back.
And a scene. That's the primary tool. So the manufacturer of fears for mercenary purposes, and people don't realize they're mercenary because they haven't thought that far ahead. They just know that they have to run from the big, bad, ugly shadow that's coming in their direction. That isn't really either big, bad, ugly, or a shadow.
So it's very similar to the ones where we like a lot of the things that we were saying about the red flags of like metaphysical practitioners and things, people to watch out for.
Yeah.
Usually are the ones that are like, you have a family curse on you. I can
Yeah.
get it off for $99.99.
We did a whole episode of it in season one. Yeah.
Yeah. Egoism is insidious and prevalent, and even the people who believe themselves to be most divine are been sucked in big time by their own egotistic society. The guy that's running around in the saffron robes and with the flowers and everything else is probably one of those people that's been absolutely sucked in by his own egoism. And Charles Manson's another story entirely, but they're in there too.
Talk about an ego.
Yeah. So, and I think we see this a lot with our current political state. And when I mention this, I'm talking both sides of the spectrum. I don't think it's one over the other, and I think it's a partnering with the media, and they've all created this fear of totalitarianism and dictatorships and all this kind of stuff. But if you prescribe to our version of it, it's going to be fine. There's and media builds into it and
Polarity, yes, dualism. Anybody that's functioning, it's dualism. The fears, all that's dualism. Anybody that's working on the scale of dualism. I mean, think about the great speeches. They were unifying speeches. Okay, they were penetrating dualism, polarity. Okay, that's how you unify people, is you put that aside. I don't care what great political speech you pull out. I don't care, the Sermon on the Mount, okay, which so many Christians don't like to listen to because they think that it's too liberal. Whatever. It's like, but that was like the center of Christ.
Yeah, like it's literally the foundations of your religion.
That's right. But I'm a Christian.
Okay.
I don't believe in that stuff.
So, and I'll throw in there, I personally believe once those doors close and they're not in the public eye, I think both sides of that spectrum, they're all just laughing at us.
Well, because
it's like we're gonna demonize the other side to keep the polarization, to keep the separation, and we get to keep our power.
I think that you get this, these priest wars. I don't think they get enough. Frankly, I think that one of the big secrets is they really don't get enough out of what they do to really feel good about things. That's where the drug abuse, alcohol abuse. If you look at the people who are doing the most manipulations, just look at there's obviously we've got a huge alcohol problem in the highest reaches of our government.
Yep.
Okay, right now, obviously. I mean, and that is a lot of that is because these people know at some deep, maybe even unconscious level, that they aren't getting what they want out of where they are.
Yeah.
And they have no clue that, again, it's always this way. They have no clue that they're the problem. Okay, and the booze, the distractions, the women, the sex, if you're a woman, the men, whatever, it's all just distractions, and it's just a way to try to not have to look straight in the face of their own demon who's saying to them, it's not enough, it's not enough, it's not enough.
It'll never be enough.
That's right,
Yep.
and it will never
Yep.
be enough, and that is your hell on earth, child, because you've decided to participate.
That's what you have earned.
That's right.
Yep.
That is what you wanted, and you manifested it. You got it. You've got the emptiness right there, the core of your being, and it's never going to go away.
So then now, is there a prescription, let's say, to breaking free from these Pied Pipers calls?
You need people like this to sit down and call out the nonsense and insist that our society have a fidelity to truth. A fidelity. We've lost fidelity to truth. Okay. Everybody thinks that you have to have fidelity to opinion. Okay. Opinion is not truth. No matter how many people you can get to agree with you that, for instance, we need to treat foreigners like subhuman and be so cruel that Christ is probably spinning on his heavenly crucifix, but yet the opinion we need to keep the opinion stable. Like I said, keeping the whole opinion thing stable is a big part of our culture. You need people to speak, to say this is what the truth is, and whoever's listening, in your heart, you know what it is. You know when you feel whole, and you know when you don't. Okay, whole is better, right? Okay, you got to do that. Okay, any emptiness you have is not anybody else's responsibility. It is yours.
I like accountability. People hate it.
You are using some very scary words here.
Responsibility.
That's what I'm saying. Don't do this unless they have to. There's no logical reason that you can convince somebody with. On Facebook, I have a Roots of Discord page, and I had a discussion on this, and there were people who posted things because I said that there's a Hindu practitioner that I quoted that said that enlightenment is not a peak in the terms of self and identity. It is a fracture. You become in many ways less, okay, because you become subordinate to the collective in a way that you never were whenever you're an ego. And people say, well, why should I even bother? And I said, you're right. There's absolutely no good reason for you to do it, because if you don't accept the fact that working from the collective is a better way to go, I have no way to convince you.
Okay, so now that actually segues quite nicely into the next question, because the next section here, I want to highlight the I versus the we, and your belief that we need to be looking at the we rather than the I as far as when the enlightenment comes. So is that, I took it initially as individual person opposed to society. Is it that, or is it more of it's the individual person but working towards and for the society?
Working for the collective.
For the collective.
It's not even society, because these people actually build societies. Okay, if you're using that as a group of people, then we're on the same page. But the collective is the group at large, the totality of the group. So when you're working for the collective, you're working not just for the people who are part of your group or your society. You're working for people who you've never met, okay, and that have an entirely different way of living their life. That's what it means to work for the collective. It means
Okay.
working for the collective experience of humanity. And again, you hear speeches like from Dr. Martin Luther King, you hear speeches from Gandhi. That's what you're going to hear in their speeches. That's what makes them different from the average political speech, is they are coming solidly from those perspectives. The perspectives that even, they talk about action that benefits even beyond the limits of the people who are hearing their words. That's one of the things that makes people truly messianic. If they are messianic, that's what makes them truly messianic, is the ability to pull these things together in a clear way that gives everybody a path of action. Even if they've read a speech 50 years later, 100 years later, they're still going to be inspired with the same action, because this stuff is not limited by time, space. It's not limited by politics or language. Okay, it is simply that apparent. And that's why people respond to it. That's why when people hit those notes, that are saying those people are just enraptured. That's why this stuff is enduring for decades, centuries, after this stuff's been said, because it is just so on mark. Okay, that's when those are the people, when people like that speak, that's who you respect. That's who you listen to.
Okay, that pulls it all in a little bit nicer and makes more sense, because my initial thought process when I saw the I versus we, it was, well, how can the we elevate if the I isn't doing
Right.
the
And
work,
that's
right?
thinking about it in
And
terms of the
that's
dualism.
yeah. So which at that process, it's like, well, boy, when we look at it from this direction, the I's really don't have a chance.
No,
Because at that point, the collective would just keep pushing them down.
and see, when you're doing this type of stuff, I have to tell you, I checked the book before I published it, and I ran a program. None of the vocabulary is beyond high school level.
Yeah.
Okay, but the words are used in ways that they were typically used in and cause the problem. But one of the things that I went out of my way to do, because for a lot of reasons, is I wanted to make this book as short as I possibly could. All right. So I mean, if I really did a commentary on that book, it would probably be so intimidating.
You're right by the pound.
Yeah. Although, like I said, the whole thing was about getting out the message that the house is on fire. Most people don't see it. If you don't get it under control, there's going to be unnecessary problems that you could avoid if you look at this. And if you look at it, I think you'll find that it makes sense and it deserves action.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really
It's just definitely one of, so I absolutely love this one author by the name of Morgan Diamond. They are have pumped out a lot of books, and all of them are sub 100 to 120 pages. Like 120 would be like in a very long book for them.
Mhm.
But there's so much information in it that even though it's that short, you don't feel like you read a short book. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And yours is kind of along that same way. There was so much thought that made me dig deep in, which is why I'm really glad we're able to have this conversation, because now there's even more to contemplate and to learn from and grow from. So it's I used to think, oh, if the book's good, it's got to be big. I'm being proven very, very wrong with it.
Well, look at the Tao Te Ching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that book is, again, just absolute timeless wisdom. Timeless wisdom.
You want to go on with the next part?
No, you can keep going.
Okay. I always worry that I speak too much. I want to be like, make sure we're not talking over. So in the book, also you talk a bit about Eastern versus Western philosophies and culture. I'm interested in kind of understanding your thought process on, because it seems like you favor the Eastern philosophies more so than the Western. and how that affects in the culture. Because when we look at some of those cultures, and this is definitely not putting them down in any means, but we see a lot of difficulty still coming from those regions. When you look at India, there's parts of it that still hold a very strict caste system. In China, it was only 40 years since Tiananmen Square. The rape of Nanjing, less than about 100 years ago. But and not just you. There's a lot of people who feign and just absolutely love the Eastern philosophies. Where is that disconnect?
Well, first of all, the Eastern philosophies are fabulous,
Mhm.
many timeless, but they don't follow them.
And that's
And there
I
it
think
lies.
that's kind of like the
It's like
perfect answer that I was expecting.
it's like the
Yeah.
concept amongst like Christianity. It's a great concept.
Exactly.
Nobody's listening to it.
That's right. The Sermon on the Mount, way too liberal for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those, like, if they would pay attention, if they would use it, it would be different.
Yeah, I mean, because it would mean that they would have to change their prejudices and predispositions, which would mean that they understand that they are no fucking Christian Christ would have to deal with.
Yeah.
This conversation was way too good to cut short. So part 3 is on its way next week. We'll see you then.
It's on you now. You have the knowledge. Do with it as you will. Until next time, the conclave has concluded.